Imagine being told that the solution to protect your family and yourself is by leaving behind everything that you've ever known: your home, your family, your friends, your memories, even your culture. Not because you wanted to leave, but because the state decides that it is easier to move you rather to protect you. That is the reality that we are debating today, unfortunately. We firmly believe that in areas prone to disasters, the state should prioritize disaster mitigation over relocation. This is not just about survival, it is about dignity, stability, and it is about whether governments should strengthen communities or abandoning them. Before moving to our arguments, first, what do we mean by disaster mitigation? It refers to efforts that reduce the impacts of disasters while allowing people to continue living where they are. These include things like flood barriers, early warning signs, evacuation systems, disaster education, etc., etc. Meanwhile, relocation means simply permanently or semi-permanently moving people away from one risky area to another, to a new settlement or a new place. And when we say prioritize, we do not mean by banning relocation completely, we just mean that we prioritize mitigation. There may be some situations where relocation becomes a solution, but our stand is that mitigation should be the government's first and main response, while relocation should only happen as a last resort. Now, who are the people affected in this debate? These are mostly fisher communities and also farmer communities, and also people with low income backgrounds. For many of these communities, land is not just a physical place for them to live in, it's their source of income, it's their identity, it's their history, and their support system. A fisherman cannot simply move inland and continue life normally. A farmer cannot just instantly rebuild generations of agricultural systems somewhere else. We think that governments should care about more than just physical survival. People deserve lives that are stable and meaningful too. The problem today is that the government thinks that relocation as the easiest solution. And why is that? Because relocation looks simple. You move people away and also they are safe and the state just still appears effective. But what happens afterward is oftenly what's ignored. People will lose their jobs, their friends, their history, their memories, even sometimes their culture. So our goal today is clear. We want governments to build resilience instead of normalizing displacement. Our first argument is quite simple. Relocation may protect people physically, but it often destroys the foundations of their lives. When communities are relocated, they lose much more than just houses or their place. They lose their routines, their livelihoods, and also their support systems. Many disaster-prone areas survive because they have built entire local ecosystems around where they live. For example, fishermen rely on coastal access, farmers rely on fertile land, and local business rely on existing communities and also their targets and consumers. When people are relocated, those systems just collapse, and even if the new location is safer, many families experience poverty, unemployment, even sometimes social isolation. Now people suddenly find themselves disconnected to the environment that they understand and depend on. And why is that? Because government often underestimates the importance of geography to people's life. To policymakers, relocation is just moving citizens from one place to another, but humans are not objects, right? They are human beings. They are a living being. They cannot just be replaced or just be moved to one another. Communities are built. They are communities. We are built through relationships, habits, trust, love, and even familiarity. And unfortunately, poorer communities are usually the easiest to relocate because they have the least power to resist and to fight. Governments choose the most convenient option instead of just the socially sustainable one, which is what we need. We need the governments to strengthen communities instead of abandoning them. We need them to invest in stronger infrastructure, flood management, early warning signs, and education, etc., etc. This means communities can continue to work and study where they live in. While becoming safer over time, people remain connected to the lives they have already built. The impacts are huge. First, economic stability is preserved. Second, that social cohesion remains intact. And third, cultural identity survives. This is especially important for traditional communities whose identity is deeply tied to the land. And lastly, citizens develop trust in the government because the state protects both their dignity and also their safety. In opposition's world, people may survive disasters physically but often lose everything else that gives their stability to live. In our world, governments reduce disaster risk while preserving community continuity. Because surviving is not enough if people lose the ability to truly live. Okay, for our second argument is that the mitigation should actually solves disaster vulnerability in the long run, while relocation often just moves the problem elsewhere. Relocation does not address the root cause of the disaster vulnerability. It simply just moves people from one risky place to an area that is less risky. But with climate change, disasters are becoming more widespread and also unpredictable. So where exactly will everyone go? A lot of cities are already overcrowded, and also government only have limited land and also resources. So many relocated populations end up getting in other vulnerable areas anyway because of poverty and lack of opportunities to get jobs, etc., meaning the cycle simply repeats itself. Again, why? Because mitigation requires long-term political commitment, but government needs to maintain infrastructure, improve environmental system, and continuously invest in adaptation. This takes time and also effort. Relocation, meanwhile, creates immediate feasible results, but even if the relocation population later struggles economically or socially, states often choose the short-term convenience over long-term resilience, which is what we need. Under our world, governments are pushed to actually strengthen disaster management system. They are pushed to strengthen communities instead of abandoning them and ignoring them. They should invest in resilient infrastructure, emergency response system, etc., and communities also become more prepared through education and evacuation training, etc. Over time, society becomes better at living with environmental risks instead of just constantly retreating from them. First, disaster damage decreases over time. Second, infrastructure becomes stronger and more sustainable. And third, governments become better prepared for future crises. Most importantly, societies become resilient instead of just reactive. In opposition's world, governments repeatedly relocate people whenever danger appears. In our world, governments solve disaster vulnerability systematically and also sustainably because mitigation addresses the causes. Relocation usually only addresses the symptom. So before I close, this debate is not simply just about keeping people alive for the next few years. It is about what kind of relationship should exist between governments and also vulnerable citizens. We believe that the state has a responsibility to protect communities, to preserve dignity, and also to invest in resilience and resistance, not simply move people away whenever problems becomes difficult. And again, we are not against relocation entirely, of course. But it should never become the default response or the main response when mitigation is still possible.